Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast podcast, brought to you in partnership with classicfootballshirts.co.uk. Visit the website, pick your shirt of choice and go to that purchase option. Whether you're a full hipster or classic collector, they have got something for you. I am your host, Chris, as usual, barring illness, death or Arsenal. Oh, sad. More about them in a minute. Joined by my two regular cohorts, Josh and Ross. Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening, sir.
Good to be back.
Happy days. It's felt like a bit of a long period, doesn't it? Because we didn't have any games last week, really, did we? And it was all a little bit. I mean, we had a few games, but I don't know. It just feels a little bit like it's been quiet. Maybe it's because two of us are Arsenal fans. And I almost wish we didn't have a game this weekend, but still. Should we start with that game? Because I suppose if you look at the Premier League fixtures this weekend, it was arguably the biggest one of note, shall we say. Arsenal-Liverpool is the game, of course, we speak about. 3-1 victory for Liverpool in this one. I think it's fair to say, Ross, I'll start with you, that the team news, particularly from an Arsenal perspective, was more of a talking point than the result in the end, even if the fans will maybe tell you otherwise now. What did you make of that team selection and the subsequent reports afterwards that Arsene Wenger stood by it?
It's a knotty one because it reminds me a lot of the first game we came back up to the Premier League in 2012, I think it was. We played Manchester City on the opening day away at the Etihad, and we dropped Ricky Lambert for the game, and my Twitter feed went into meltdown. I was like, how on earth can you drop Ricky Lambert? He's our talisman, he scored all our goals in the Championship and League One, does this mean he's on his way out, etc. And then he came on in the second half, set one up, scored one, and then at the end Nigel Atkins said that's exactly why we left him on the bench, because we knew he'd be able to come on and have that impact. When I saw that Sanchez had been left out, I kind of thought, well, there's a tactical reason for it. He's probably going to be primed to come on in the second half and catch Liverpool a bit colder, you know. But to me, it still didn't really make as much sense as, for example, Ricky Lambert's did. I could see what we were doing by dropping Ricky, but I don't see what the advantage was of having Sanchez for only half a game, you know. And I think the half he was playing, Arsenal were a lot better, and obviously he set up the goal from Danny Welbeck. So it was a strange one. Clearly there was a tactical idea behind it, and it hasn't paid off. If it does pay off, then I think that, you know, a lot of Arsenal fans are sat there saying, well, that was a really good decision because he's just won us the game. Unfortunately, it's backfired, and now we just have no understanding of why.
Yeah, and once again, a very unhappy fan base. Josh, what did you make of the game itself? I mean, obviously the tactics alone and the selection alone was odd. I think it's fair to say. Even the most sort of strong, most strong supporter of Arsene Wenger would have raised an eyebrow to that selection. But as Ross said there, it didn't really work until Alexis came off the bench and they got that goal back. But ultimately, Arsenal were exposed for 3 goals that surely were avoidable. Is that a fair comment, or was it that Liverpool were actually very, very good on the day?
Yeah, I think the final goal to work through them backwards was more about a team that's pushing to try and get an equaliser, getting caught on the break. You can concede a goal like that at any level for any quality. You can hark back to Barcelona conceding one against Chelsea with Fernando Torres, the infamous Gary Neville screaming for that particular goal. But the way that Liverpool went about their business, it was very, very good. I think that Arsenal just didn't set out, although they set out with a different tactical plan than normal, I just don't think they executed it very well, because I think the team that was selected could have beaten Liverpool. Liverpool made a couple of changes from their last game. They'd brought in a proper centre-back as opposed to Lucas Leiva, who was exposed against Leicester with pace. So you could see the logic with Arsene dropping the pace from his attack, because the defence for Liverpool would be geared up to deal with that after the dodgy result they had versus Leicester. So I think overall, Liverpool did do very well, but it's from what we've seen for them against the big teams at Anfield.
Yes, they've not been the greatest start to the season, start to the year, sorry, for Liverpool in terms of results, but against the top six, they seem to have a bit of an Indian sign over most of them. They have a very good record at getting up for the big games, maybe not the lesser ones. Just in terms of the top four race, Ross, I mean, does this, obviously, we should stress that we didn't mention the Liverpool game on Monday, where, of course, they went down to Leicester 3-1. We'll save that for more Leicester talk in a minute, but where does it sort of leave Arsenal and indeed Liverpool in this race? Because it does seem like it's a shootout of realistically any 3 from 4, maybe even 5 for that top 4 spot, if we are to assume Chelsea are going to win the league, which I think we all do. So is this a real serious damage to Arsenal's top 4 hopes, and does it put Liverpool back into the race firmly?
It absolutely does. I don't know if this particular result is the blow that knocks Arsenal out of the top 4 for the rest of the season, or if they do finish 5th/6th, I'm not sure. I'll look back at this result and say this was the one. But it's certainly damaging. It's damaging for the fan base, it's damaging for the players, and it's a morale boost for a club like Liverpool as well. And some of the teams around them picked up some very good points today. I think Manchester United will see it as a big missed opportunity as well. If Man United had managed to climb up to 5th this weekend, then it would have been a big blow, or a bigger blow, for Arsenal. But I'm not of the opinion that this game is the one that's going to define where either of these two sides end up, but you can't deny that 3 points over a rival for the Champions League places isn't a massive boost or a massive loss in Arsenal's case.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely one of those games where you look at it and you go, one result is bigger for one than the other, but ultimately it doesn't change too much if results are not picked up over the following few weeks in the following next fixtures. So that's that game dealt with. That, of course, was the evening game of the Saturday fixtures. The early game, there was quite a lot to talk about in this one, wasn't there, gentlemen? Because Manchester United drew with Bournemouth. Now, I'll freely admit to you both here, I elected not to bother watching this because I just didn't see any way that Bournemouth would get anything out of this. I didn't think it'd be a particularly entertaining game, so I did some shopping, which is terribly un-hipster of me, I know. But nevertheless, it was anything but what I expected. It was entertaining. It was a surprise, and Bournemouth did get something. Josh, I'm sure there's a lot of incidents we can pull from this, but feel free to pull out anything you want from this, and where you think this leaves both clubs in terms of their current fixtures, because Bournemouth will be happy with the point, surely, but I don't think Manchester United will they?
No, Bournemouth haven't been particularly good on the road this season, especially when they then go down to 10 men. I think it was late in this first half, with Andy Sermon getting a second yellow card. I think it was an interesting result. Man U should have had enough to get through. We've seen them, by hook or by crook, get a result from teams like this, especially at Old Trafford. But I think there were a number of talking points that leaves this draw kind of to the side, with the incident with Zlatan and Tyrone Mings, the thing that dominated the back pages as opposed to the game itself.
What did you make of all that then? What was your sort of thoughts on the whole incident?
Looking back at it, in retrospect, I am very surprised that the ref didn't call anything on it. It's just crazy, especially with a weekend where it's been known that the referees have been off on a stag do. I think it would be the same for players, that they can't go off and have these kind of things during the season, and why refs are allowed to have a stag do during that time, I'm not really sure. I would have thought that would be something that they'd do over the summer during their break, because we saw a number of interesting decisions, should we say, this weekend across other games, which I'm sure we'll get to. But looking at it, I think both players should have walked, and I think retrospective action will be taken against them. We know Zlatan's got the bit of the dark arts about him, and I think Tyrone Mings is just, if he was a more experienced defender, would either, one, do it more subtly, or two, just rise above it and not bother.
Some good points made there, and Ross, I wanted to talk about from a I suppose we can talk about both sides really, but from a Manchester United perspective, first of all, Jose Mourinho's comments after the game, I don't know if you heard this, but he described Bournemouth as being delighted with their little point. I know we get some stick on this podcast for being a little bit harsh towards certain managers, but he's being a bit of a dick, isn't he? I mean, that sort of a comment, their little point. It's almost like he's sort of saying, well, I'm not going to make I'm not going to have a go at anybody. I'm not going to make excuses, but I am still going to have a little dig at a club who've come and have set up shop, and they've got a good point. I mean, they played with 10 men for a long period of this game. So do you think his comments are a little bit sniffy against a smaller club that really, a talent pool of his, should be beating?
Absolutely, they are. It is a disrespectful thing to say. And I've always believed that managers should cover themselves in a bit more glory and be very respectful, win, lose or draw. So I'm not going to defend him. I will say that I love Mourinho, always have, and those kinds of comments do make me laugh. It's part of the magic of Mourinho, is that he will get a 1-1 draw against Bournemouth. Man United will completely outplay them, completely smother them, be wasteful with their chances. I mean, £90 million bought you Paul Pogba and he can still stuff one, and Zlatan misses a penalty, and all these incidents with the red cards that should be given and shouldn't be given, and all this kind of stuff. And then he goes out afterwards and he takes a little dig at the opponents. That kind of stuff I find really funny, and that's one of the reasons I like Mourinho. But I can't defend it. It's a very disrespectful thing to say to a team that thoroughly deserved their point. I think Artur Boruc had one of the games of his life, and I think Southampton fans, Celtic fans, I think he was with Fiorentina for a spell as well, wasn't he, in Italy? I think any fan of any club that has ever had Artur Boruc at their club will tell you that it's a very difficult balance to strike with him. Sometimes you'll absolutely hate him because he'll drop a clanger like he did last week, where he goes to punch ball, completely misses it. And then this week, he's the reason they stayed in that game for as long as they did and got a really, really invaluable point. So it's a massive point for Bournemouth, but Man United, I think, have to look at their own finishing and their own chance conversion. But if you're asking me directly about Mourinho, I can't defend that comment, but I think that's part of the reason I love him, is just that he continually finds ways to deflect from himself, from the players, and even when it's a point that we should be looking at and saying, congratulations Bournemouth, what a point, he's still taking a shot. It's just one of the things I like about him. But I know there are plenty out there, yourself included, that think that's a little on the nose.
Yes, little. And please don't talk to me about goalkeepers coming out punching balls and getting nowhere near them. More on that on the European podcast tomorrow. Sigh. Anywho, just before we move on from this game as well, what was your thoughts on the incident? And maybe have a little word for Bournemouth, because I think you've got a stat to share with us in a second. But we were talking pre-pod, and I was saying Zlatan, he reminds me a lot of the great Dennis Bergkamp, in that he's a brilliant footballer, clearly. He does have a little bit of a nasty side to him, a little bit of a streak. Dennis was quite famous for being a bit spiky if provoked. Two incidents in particular, obviously, Zlatan, he was punished for 4 matches for comments made about opponents Marseille a couple of years back in the 2015. That was sort of verbal comments. And he was also banned for 2 games for, quote-unquote, raising a boot into the chest of Stéphane Ruffier, the St Etienne goalkeeper, when it could have been avoided, I think it's fair to say, looking at the replays of that incident. So he's got it in him. So what did you make of that situation? And on Bournemouth, is this the sort of quote-unquote fight they need to show to get some points on the board, based upon that stat you can share with us?
Let's start with the stat. I think they were one of 2 clubs to share the stat until this week, because Leicester obviously got a couple of wins as well. But Bournemouth are yet to win in 2017. That's in League or Cup. So they're not on a great run. The defensive issues haven't been fixed since they lost Nathan Ake. This weekend, I'm not sure I want to say they were fixed, because like I said a minute ago, it was more to do with Man United not putting their chances away. And I thought Zlatan had a really poor game overall. I think I'm the only one that watched the whole thing, which is strange because I'm usually the one that misses the big games. But Zlatan, I thought, had a really poor game, and he ended up getting me -2 points on my fantasy football team for missing that bloody penalty as well. But he clearly looked like a player this weekend that was being frustrated by his opposition. I think he's taken a dig at Tyrone Mings with a quote-unquote deliberate or sneaky stamp, whatever you want to call it. And then obviously Tyrone Mings has come back with his head stamp. Now it's difficult to know for definite whether Tyrone Mings is meant to do that. It depends entirely on which team you support, I think. But it's indefensible, and whether you mean it to or not, you can't allow that on a football field. You've got to punish that. So even if they did do it by accident, they know for next time, right? Make sure make sure I've got control over my feet and I know where I'm putting my feet. The elbow from Zlatan, I know he's suggesting that Tyrone Mings jumps into it, but there's just no way. You can see the footage in 1,000 different angles, and it's obvious that he's thrown an elbow. For me, retrospective action has to be taken on both of them. It is another call, especially after last week with Gabbiadini's offside. It is another call for video technology for referees. But I was talking to John about this yesterday in the WhatsApp group about the game as it was happening, and as I was saying to him, even if you have video technology and you look back at those decisions, how do you fix that one? Do you send off Mings for the stamp and then not send off Zlatan because that incident wouldn't have happened if Mings wasn't on the field, or do you send off both of them? It's really, really difficult, and it's one of those that does create a bit of a double standard when it comes to video technology, and it's difficult to know exactly how that would have played out. But I think it's another good example of why we need more help for the assistants, because neither of those incidents can be allowed, surely, to be carried over into other games. They have to be stamped out as soon as you see them.
If you pardon the pun. It's definitely a grey area, isn't it? And for all of you listening that think I'm going to defend Zlatan, I'm not. As much as I love him, I think for me, it's a clear retaliation. I think there's also a bit of a semi-stamp that he misses before he gets trodden on by Mings. The more I see the Mings one, the more I'm actually thinking. I agree with what Martin Kieran said, more on him in a moment, when he said that you know where you're putting your feet. I do agree with that, but I don't necessarily agree that he actually sort of aimed the stamp at Zlatan. I think it was almost a little bit of two of the same. It was a little bit of niggle and a little bit of misplaced feet, but nevertheless, a good point for Bournemouth, and points dropped for Manchester United at home again after drawing, of course, with Burnley a few weeks back. That won't be the result they were looking for. Let's have a look at some other games from the weekend then. Sticking at the top very briefly, we can touch on Man City beating Sunderland on the Sunday, 2-0. I was bored to death, I've got to be honest. I kind of tried and then gave up halfway through the second half. I found it so dull. Ross, I know you quite like Pep. You want to defend his style. I can't stand it. Make no bones about that. Nevertheless, it's effective. So who's this a bigger result for? Man City continuing their sort of charge up the league, or is it a bigger result for Sunderland to continue to look doomed?
I don't think Sunderland would have looked at this and thought they were going to get any points from this anyway, so I'm not sure this is a massive loss for them. For Man City, obviously, it's clearly a massive 3 points because the teams around them are winning and putting pressure on them. As for Pep's style, I have done everything I can to enjoy it more. I've tried every tactic. I've pretended I've never seen them before. I have tried to enjoy it on a skill base, or I've tried to enjoy it on a entertainment. I just can't. When they're 0-0 or when they're chasing a game, I find Pep's Man City to be quite enjoyable because they're a lot more forthright, they're a lot more offensive, and they're a lot more counter-attacking. I think that's where they're at their best. But as soon as they go 1 or 2 goals up, and then it starts dropping back and it's side to side and it's probing passes and it's maintaining possession and looking for space rather than trying to attack it, that's when I kind of go, no, this really isn't for me. And I didn't watch the game today because I couldn't bring myself to, but I did watch the FA Cup game against Huddersfield. And for a little while, they were really entertaining to watch Man City, and then they got that stranglehold on the game, and then it was just in midfield, side to side, and I just can't. It's not my kind of style. I love Pep Guardiola. I think he's a brilliant coach, but I just can't do his style. It's one of those 6 of one, half a dozen of the others for me. I love him, but I can't watch his games for more than 45 minutes. So massive points, but I'm still with you. The style, I've tried so hard, but I can't get on board with it.
No, me neither. And desperately disappointing for Sunderland again. Although I think, in fairness, they probably would have looked at this game and gone, well, anything we get from this is a bonus, and they got nothing. So there's no bonus on offer today. Josh, what about Spurs? Because they also got a victory over Everton on Sunday. A bit of a weird game, this, because it wasn't a particularly good spectacle first half. Harry Kane's long-range goal, which was a very well-taken goal from distance. I did think Alan Smith describing it on the Sky commentary as classic centre-forward play was a little odd, given the fact he was 35 yards from goal when he hit it, but still. he sort of fired Spurs in front. Everton didn't really offer anything. Kane himself got a second after a poor bit of goalkeeping from what's his face? Forgot his name. The Everton keeper, Robles. Thank you very much. And then Romelu Lukaku, as usual, scoring when it didn't matter. I'm joking. Pulled one back with 10 minutes to go. Dele Alli scoring the clinching third before Anna Valencia responded at the other end, but it was too little, too late for Koeman. So I think it's the first defeat in 10 for them. Spurs continue to stride on. They still sit second in the league. So were you quite impressed with Spurs, or were you more impressed with, disappointed that Everton didn't really come to play? They played with, as Ross had just put in our chat there, the Christmas tree formation. He didn't really go at Spurs at any point in this game, did they? Didn't really test them.
No, I think the way that Koeman has set up Everton this season has been fairly odd, but I did expect this to be a high-scoring game. Getting 3-2 from there was kind of assumed, but having the midfield with Gareth Barry in it, I think he was targeted by Spurs, and he just looked all of the 35, I believe he is now, because he was just completely swamped by that big, powerful midfield that Spurs have got now. Otherwise, Kane's still doing it. 2 goals for him again. I think he's up to 13 goals in 12 league and cup games in 2017. So he's really on form, as is Lukaku as well. I think where Spurs finish at the end of the season is down to Harry Kane, and he has shown himself to not be injury prone. So I think if they continue and don't bottle it like they did last season, I think second is very much theirs.
Just some fair points made there. Just before we do move on for this game, I want to get both of your opinions on this debate of strikers, what is world class, what isn't. I mean, this was billed as the battle of the number 10s. The sort of Harry Kane is obviously on very good form this season. A lot of people said that he would be, a one-season wonder, myself included. I didn't think he would be as consistent as he has been. I'll hold my hands up on that one. So where do both of you stand on who is the better forward between Lukaku and Kane? And a sub-question on top of that, which of the two do you think is more likely to be a player we really look at for years to come on the European stage? Ross, do you have an opinion on that?
Right. So for me, I think the striker I would rather have in my team, if I was Southampton manager, for example, is Harry Kane, because he turns up in the big games and single-handedly wins games for Tottenham on a more regular basis for me than Lukaku does. But for me, I also believe that Lukaku is going to be far more influential on the European stage than Harry Kane is. I get the feeling that Harry Kane is going to go much the same route as Wayne Rooney, where by the time he retires from England duty in 10-15 years' time, we're going to look back on him and go, oh, well, he didn't win us this, he didn't win us that. He wasn't influential enough at this tournament. Whereas I reckon Lukaku is going to turn up for Belgium, and if he ever gets into the Champions League and moves clubs, then I reckon he's going to be a very good player there, because we've had this debate 1,000 times that for me he's got all the quality of a world-class striker, he just doesn't do it enough, and I reckon if he had the service, then he could, and I don't think he's going to get that at Everton. So it's a tough one. I would much sooner have Harry Kane in my Southampton side, but I think Lukaku has got the best long-term future.
Good answer to that. And Josh, same question to you, really. I mean, is there a preferred option that you have, all biases aside?
So I think Sky did this just before the game kicked off, where they went for Premier League goals the last 5 seasons between Kane and Lukaku, and it shows the meteoric rise of Harry Kane since he had 2013-14. He didn't really appear for Spurs and broke onto the scene 2 seasons ago, where he then got 21 goals in 14-15, then 25, and now is on 19 goals. Whereas Lukaku has been doing it for a couple more seasons before that. He's been doing it consistently for 5 seasons, that he's got at least double figures in every season that he's played. So I think looking at it that way, Romelu's got the kind of consistency of the last 5 seasons behind him. But as you say, Harry Kane offers a little bit more. I think there's more work that you'd need to put into Lukaku to get him to be world class, because he has got all the attributes. I think his attitude's just not right up there that you need at the top level. So I think Harry Kane is the better striker.
Yeah, agreed. I think what will be very interesting between both those centre forwards is, although that they have both, certainly Harry Kane has put pen to paper on a new contract. I think Lukaku there's talk that he wants to be, or is going to be signing a new deal. I think what will be very interesting is, of the two, who moves first, because I personally don't see either of them long term at the clubs they're at right now. I think Lukaku's probably more likely to leave Everton sooner than Kane is to leave Spurs. But that said, I do wonder if a club like a Manchester United came calling for Harry Kane. We all know Daniel Levy likes to cash in on some money. And given the fact that Spurs obviously are having to put a lot of money into this stadium, that they're rebuilding. I, as an Arsenal fan, can tell you firsthand, chairmen don't like to continue spending money when they're putting money into a stadium. So I wouldn't be that surprised if, as I say, a Manchester United, a Man City, even a Chelsea came calling for Harry Kane. Would he potentially have his head turned, however much he might be invested in the Spurs project? So, and my answer to this, because Ross, I know you're desperate to know. Neither. Let's move on.
It's Zlatan, isn't it? That's your real answer.
Thank you very much. You read my mind. No, as much as I want to give you an answer, I'm going to bottle it and sit on the fence and say they're both quite good, and I'll leave it at that. Yeah, you know me. Let's talk about another guy. I'm going to get so much hate for that answer, aren't I? Stoke City beat Middlesbrough 2-0. I don't really want to talk about the game because, frankly, it was just there. 2 goals for Marko Arnautovic for Stoke, who seemed to have put last week's awful display at White Hart Lane behind them to win again this week. So good for them. But Ross, Middlesbrough, they're sinking, aren't they? They're sinking. And we had a bit of a discussion on them last week. Anything you saw yesterday change your mind in them? Because if anything, it only made my mind up that they're even more in trouble than they were last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I say this every week, but if I was to pick my bottom 3, Middlesbrough would be in it right now. I think they would actually be 19th. I'd put them, one off Sunderland. The issue is that they haven't fixed this goal scoring thing at all this season, and although they've tried to address the defensive balance, that hasn't worked either. I know they dropped Negredo this weekend. They tried to start Regis Stead. I'm surprised they bought Regis Stead because he hasn't really been in form since about 2013 when he was with Blackburn. But he's still a very good striker, and I think he brings more to the side. But they just don't have enough about them up front anymore. They've swapped everything they were in the Championship for the past 3 seasons for this attempt at a defensive juggernaut, and it's just not worked because it's not who they are. It's not what they're built for. So I am really worried for them, and I think the thing that scares me more isn't just so much that the performances and the results aren't going well, but the Oita Karanka problem is still brewing, and it seems like every single week it just seems to just bubble a bit more and get a little bit worse, and I'm kind of waiting for the cap to pop off this particular shaking soda pop, because Karanka has been at odds with his chairman and the players and fans at Middlesbrough for about a year now. They fixed it last time out when he left Middlesbrough for about 2 weeks last season, and he came back in and he's got them up and blah 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 blah, but it's never really seemed to go on, and I think the more this carries on, the more chance you've got of seeing it explode. And for me, Middlesbrough are in deep trouble, and I don't see a way of them getting out of it at the moment.
No, me neither. They just look like a side. If you can't score goals and you are starting to ship them, which they weren't at the start of the season, but they are now, I just can't see them getting out of this at the moment. And yeah, we'll have to look at their fixtures in a minute. Maybe we'll do that before we round up the rest of the games. We'll look at the other fixtures. But Josh, I want to give you Crystal Palace because they went away to West Brom and they got a 2-0 victory. Now, I hovered over this when I was doing my Saturday betting, and I thought, wouldn't it be just so typical after all the bad blood that's gone on between Palace owners and West Brom, Tony Pulis and all that jazz, it'd just be so typically Crystal Palace to go and win there, and they did. A lovely goal from Andros Townsend, which he tends to do once a year. He's usually just once a year, but lovely goal for him, and Will Saha with the other. the other goal in this game, it puts Palace into a position of semi-safety. And what I mean by that is, what are they? 3 points clear of the drop zone now. Is this a game that could potentially turn, not the season, but turn the Allardyce regime?
I think this result is more worrying for Middlesbrough than it is for West Brom. From that point of view, West Brom are going great guns in the Premier League this season. I think it's only the bad blood between Pulis and Palace that is the only thing that he'll be disappointed about, not being able to get one over his former employers and go towards getting a win bonus that would help him pay back that £3 million he owes them. But I think looking at the teams that are sitting in and around that zone, I think this could be the start, as you say, of Palace getting up there. They've got quite a good goal difference in comparison to those around them. Borough aren't scoring any goals, so I can only see their goal difference getting worse and worse. So Palace are there with -11, and everyone around them is in the -20s or -15s up at Leicester and Bournemouth. So I think looking at where everyone's sitting, that this is the right time that a team comes into form, especially with Leicester now appearing to now play for the manager, that I think it's going to be a very interesting season, although I'd like to see him go down. That being said.
No bias there whatsoever. Nicely set up, really, with that last comment, because it's Leicester we'll go to next. Ross, what? It's been an interesting week, hasn't it, for Leicester City? A 3-1 victory when they all decided to turn up, strangely enough, on Monday against Liverpool. They then came from behind to beat Hull City yesterday by 3-1. Even Riyad Mahrez decided to turn up with a goal in that game. I'm just going to go ahead and be a little bit brutal here. Craig Shakespeare, absolute snake. I'm not buying this bloke for 1 second. He sounds to me like the most disingenuous snake in the grass I've seen in many, many years at football. Everything about him just doesn't sit right with me. I know you want to touch on Martin Kieran's comments on this as well, because he was equally as frustrated as I am by the whole affair. I'm just not buying it, mate. I don't like it. I don't like how he's coming across. I don't like how he's sort of taking so much credit for what's going on. And all of a sudden, I think Kieran touched on this, all of a sudden he wants to be a manager. It doesn't sit well with me. How do you feel about this? And how do you feel about what's going on at Leicester with these 2 wins and obviously yesterday's victory in isolation? A 3-1 win over Hull is quite a big result for both clubs, isn't it?
Yeah, I do want to make a point about Martin Keough. I do also want to make a point about Andros Townsend's goal, but considering there's now all this momentum behind the Craig Shakespeare thing, I'm going to stick with that for a minute, and I'll get back to Townsend in a second. Martin Keough on Match of the Day suggested that he was... I think Josh summed it up earlier in the WhatsApp group. He was kind of suggesting that he hadn't even let Ranieri's body go cold yet, which I think is a very good point. My issue with Martin Keough's take on it was more that he was setting a precedent whereby someone that's been in a part-time job saying that they want it is a problem, which for me is an odd thing to suggest, because I think Leicester are a very attractive club to go in and manage, and I completely understand why Craig Shakespeare would want it. But I do agree that less than a week after Ranieri got the sack, he's in charge, he's motivating those players, he's suddenly got them playing the exact same way as they were last year, and now he's making musings about being the manager full time. It does feel a bit distasteful, it does feel a bit suspicious, and you do start to wonder if something's gone on backstage, maybe with Craig Shakespeare. But he was involved in the England setup as well, wasn't he? And I get the feeling that he's enjoyed his time with England, he's enjoyed his time with Leicester and the success they had last year, and he's starting to think, right, I could do this myself now. You know, that's the impression I get, which is no bad thing, but it's like you say, it's a little distasteful with Leicester still mourning Ranieri, really, to suddenly be all over this position. I do briefly want to just say on Andros Townsend's goal for Crystal Palace, I know we're jumping back here, but I have to make the point. Everyone's going mental over it and talking about him as if he's Lionel Messi. can we remind ourselves about Gaston Ramirez and Dimitri Payet scoring solo goals that were far better than that? Because let's put this into context. He's won the ball back in his own area. Fair enough, he's sprinted about 20, 30 yards, but he's outmuscled a teenager. Then he's jogged for 15 yards. I only give him credit for jinking around his man and firing it in. Far better solo goals have been scored this season than the one Townsend scored. I refuse to buy that knocking over a teenager and walking for 15 yards is better than, for example, Gaston Ramirez's. That's a side note, but nonetheless, I have to make the point.
And point well made. Yes, sorry to be so blunt about it, but I just don't like what's gone on at Leicester, and it just doesn't sit well with me at all. But that's just me, and please feel free to tweet us your thoughts if you feel otherwise on that one.
I think it's also the position that Shakespeare held before Ranieri got sacked. I think when you normally see a caretaker come in, they're not necessarily the assistant manager, and if they are, they normally are a bit more tactful about when they say they'd like the job. So I'm just thinking back to Fulham when they were doing their roller coaster of managers in the Premier League. I think when it was Kit Simons came in, and he said almost off the bat he wanted the job, but he was a coach. He wasn't really that close to the manager. I think this does kind of all smell of some kind of player and assistant manager coup against Ranieri.
I think the thing with Kit Simons as well, though, is that Fulham were already in disarray. You know, we already knew that Fulham were a complete mess at the top and they were probably going to go down. So Kit Simons saying, yeah, I want this job full time, was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. He just wants to bring some stability to the club. This one kind of feels more like you say, like a coup, because of all the stories we've heard the past few weeks about the players getting involved and not playing for the manager, and now suddenly they're playing exactly the same way they were last year. This one does feel a bit more personal, and examples like Kit Simons, they're good references, but I think with that one, for example, it was one of those situations where I don't think anyone really minded, because we kind of knew that Fulham were a mess and they needed a managerial change anyway, whereas this one, I think everyone was just so upset to see Ranieri go and all the stories that came out. This one feels a bit more sinister.
And it's the way that they have literally just clicked back into gear, isn't it? It's not like we've seen a few glimpses of, a few players have got fresh ideas, fresh challenges. It's the same side, it's the same tactics. It's literally snapped back into gear for last year. And that reeks to me as granted a very low level manager, at Sunday League level, when players are playing for you. You know when players are having a strop. You know behind the scenes when somebody is trying to get under your skin or trying to cause an issue. And I just, for me, it's all reeks a little bit of maneuverability and power play almost. And don't like it. But something I do like is the fact that Paul Clement is doing a rather good job at Swansea, because I think it's good for the league to keep a bit of Welsh interest at the top flight. Josh, 3-2 victory over Burnley doesn't even begin to tell the full story of this one, does it? Interesting refereeing decision made in this one. 2 Andre Gray goals, 2 Fernando Llorente goals, 1 coming right at the death. It's a massive victory this for Swansea, isn't it? 3-2 in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Llorente was absolutely key to this victory, just showing the quality of having a striker like that in your team can really turn it around. I think we can't avoid it any longer. That penalty decision for Burnley was absolutely incredible. So the ball comes in from, I believe it's a corner. There's a handball in the box. It's called by all the Swansea players. Referee goes to have a look at it and calls it as a penalty for Burnley in the Swansea box, and replays show it comes off, I believe it's Ben Mee, the Burnley centre-back's arm. And how that was given is just incredible, because all the Swansea players were calling for it. The Burnley players, Joey Barton, I believe, was the only one I could see on the replay that was calling for it, but at least 3 or 4 of the Swansea players were all shouting for it, and Anthony Taylor's just had an absolute mare.
interesting quote. Did you hear on Match of the Day? I think one of the commentators said, "Oh, should we align the fact that all these referees have been on a stag do, and the referees made this decision?" And then I think there was another incident. I think it was during the Spurs game. Was it Clattenburg ran out of spray? And the commentator again said, "Oh, has he run out of spray due to this stag do?" This this stag do thing just came up again and again and again. But I think, would it be fair, Ross, to say that thank God that Swansea did get this victory, because had they not have done, I mean, these are the sort of things I think back to, was it Bolton, from memory, who didn't get given a goal and actually ended up going down that season because they didn't get awarded an onside goal for offside, something like that. These sort of decisions have a nasty way of coming back and biting teams in a really big way. So should we just sort of take that crumb of comfort that Llorente was able to get that late winner to eliminate all the controversy?
I'm certainly glad he did, because it would have been extremely cruel to have gone down to such a terrible call. I think the thing that it really does amaze me is, like Josh said, it was only Swansea players that were calling for it. Why on earth would you sell your own teammate out if you've seen them handle the ball? It's a bizarre incident, and the referee himself doesn't even look completely sold on it. I reckon it was the linesman in his ear that said, "I've seen it hit a hand." But the referee just seems to be looking around like, "I'm not sure about that one," even when he's given it. I mean, there's another stupid referee decision in the Zlatan game, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute, but this stag do, how big was this stag do? You know, how long did it go on for? Because I can't understand how it's affected so many games and in so many brazen, obvious decisions as well. This was probably the worst one.
Very, very strange one, wasn't it? Very, very strange. Before we move on to all things EFL, and actually I want to run through these relegation fixtures in a second. But Ross, you can have your time on Southampton. So 4-3 win against Watford. That was crazy.
Oh, it was game of the day. It was fantastic. The refereeing decision that I want to make a point about, because it wasn't mentioned by any pundit from what I can see, was Yunus Kabul clearly steps over the line as he takes a throw in. And then the ball drops to Troy Deeney, who scores a fantastic goal. It's a beautiful, beautiful take, but the throw, it's clearly a foul throw, and no one notices it. He's got at least half a boot over the line, and everyone's managed to miss it. I don't understand how, because I saw it on live TV. But there you go. It ultimately didn't really matter, thankfully for us. The goal from Troy Deeney is an absolute peach. I think it's the best one in the game. And then Southampton just kind of turned up. You know, we were dead and buried for the first 5 minutes, but really turned on the style. It's so nice to see us have 2 weeks to prepare for a game now, or in this case a week to prepare for the game, and to be able to see the team developing. We've gone back to a 4-2-3-1. It's bringing the best out of Tadic. It's clearly bringing the best out of Gabbiadini. It's bringing the best out of Redmond. Ward-Prowse is now finding a position out on the wing. He's putting in a lot more deliveries, getting a lot more involved. He's been a joy to watch the past couple of games. It's starting to feel like now that we're turning a corner, and this result was massive, because we don't score 4 goals very often. I know we did last time out against Sunderland as well. It's actually the first time we've scored 4 goals in 2 games since the 2010-2011 season when we went up in League One. So good stat, and it's another good sign for Clawell. Some of the football was really, really nice to watch, and I'm hoping that now that we've got some time to settle down, that we can develop and kick on. As for Watford, I thought they were unlucky not to get something from this game, if not just alone for the quality of Troy Deeney's finish. I thought they were good enough to get a point, but clearly they made some silly mistakes at the back, especially for the 4th goal, and they just kind of switched off a couple too many times, and they didn't create as many chances as us from memory. I only really remember Forster having to make 2 or 3. So there were good signs for Watford, and I'm a little bit upset for them they didn't get something from it, but clearly, as a Southampton fan, that's a massive result. It's another 2 weeks before we play again because of the fixture pile-up, but it's a big result, and it's an important way to respond after last week's final.
Yeah, it looked like the classic game of we're safe, you're safe, let's just go and have a game of football, almost. It had that kind of end-of-season feel about it for long periods, but was a very decent game. Josh, you had a quick point on, was it just the Troy Deeney goal or the game as a whole?
Just as a whole. I know I might be a bit late to the party on this, but Gabbiadini was absolutely fantastic. I have seen him a bit in Italy, but the movement and where the positions he was getting into looked like a seasoned poacher. I don't know if Ross has seen that in the last couple of games. Obviously, he's grabbed a goal in every game he's appeared for, I believe. But
he's the first Southampton player to score in his first 3 Premier League games, or first 3 league games, as it were.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And just on the Deeney goal, it's not as good as everyone thinks. I saw it the first time and I was like, no, I could do that.
I think
it's one of those that I think, as the majority of the country are right-footed players when it comes to football, if anyone does anything just slightly good with their left foot, everyone's caught in awe with it. I get the same with a right-footed player, where everyone's like, oh, that goal's a bit meh, because I have no idea how they've done it, because I just can't get my body in that shape with my right foot. But how Troy Deeney cushions that, yeah, it's a good goal, but that's the only place you can put it with your left foot. You can only put it into that far corner with the way that his body's lined up for it. I think the only difference between that, me and him hitting that, is he probably puts it in there 9 times out of 10, and I probably do it about 4. But otherwise, I think it's not a bit like the Townsend goal. It's not as, the hype on it. It's a bit too much. Another left-footed player, just as a coincidence as well.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. This just in, goals are overrated, says Josh. No, I know what you're saying. It's some people do get a little over the top with certain goals, but nevertheless, a goal it was, albeit in a defeat. Just before we move on to the EFL Roundup this week, just going to take some time to read the next 4 fixtures for each of the teams that are down there in the relegation area. Premier League fixtures, of course. Reading down upwards. So Sunderland, Burnley at home, Watford away, Leicester away, Manchester United at home. Hull City, Swansea home, wow. Everton away, West Ham at home, Middlesbrough at home, equally well. Then we've got Middlesbrough, obviously Manchester City at home, that's the FA Cup game, ignore that one, sorry. Next Premier League games, Manchester United at home, Swansea away, Hull City away, Burnley at home. Triple wow there. Crystal Palace are up next. They have got Watford at home, Chelsea away, Southampton away, and Arsenal at home. Some tough ones in that group there. Swansea are away to Hull, away to Bournemouth, home to Middlesbrough, home to Spurs, and Leicester, if you still count them in it, in fact Bournemouth as well. Leicester have got West Ham away, Stoke at home, Sunderland at home, away to Everton, and Bournemouth, if you want to still have them in the mix, they have got West Ham at home, Swansea at home, Southampton away, Liverpool away. Some quite tasty fixtures, I think it's fair to say, in that group. So I think the relegation fight might be something that will be really cranking up a notch in the coming weeks. Of course, there are a few weeks where teams have not got games because of FA Cup commitments, etc. But yes, we'll be across all those fixtures, of course, in the coming weeks. Stay tuned, as I'm sure there'll be plenty of twists and turns to come. Right, let's move on then to EFL action. Russ, this is your opportunity to give us a heads up on what's been going on in the leagues below the Premier League, because yes, they do exist. So what's been happening in the EFL this week?
Right, League 2 is fascinating this weekend for me. I think it's had the best weekend it's had all season long. So I'm going to start with just 5 results, and then I'm going to take you through the table just to kind of contextualise them. Newport County 0, Leyton Orient 4, Hartlepool United 3, Exeter 1, Portsmouth 0, Crew Alexandra 1. Funny story there, the Crew manager David Artell told his players this week, you have to stay up or you're going to be milkmen. And then they went and turned over Portsmouth away. A fantastic result. Yeovil 0, Luton Town 4, and Plymouth 2, Carlisle 0 in probably the biggest game of the weekend. Now, the table is the really interesting thing, and I would highly recommend you go and take a look at it just so you can contextualise this a bit more for yourself. But the results have changed so much on this table. I mean, last week we were talking about Hartlepool being in big trouble in the relegation zones. Their results this weekend have now put them up to 21st and have got them 6 points clear of the drop zone. Notts County now go down into 22nd. Leyton Orient, I mean, we've been talking about Leyton Orient for weeks now as a club that are just kind of dead and buried, but they're still kicking, and that's a fantastic result. 4-0 away to Newport County. I know Newport are the only team below them, but that's a massive result. Closes the gap now to 5 points on Notts County, but suddenly the complexion of the bottom 4 is so much different after all those results. What that win could mean for Leyton Orient, I mean, who knows? Crewe Alexandra as well, that's a big result for them, which unfortunately for them, it still drops them down a position, but that's another massive 3 points for them. Like I say, their manager was firing out some pretty stern warnings about their possible future this season, so that's a massive result, especially away to a team like Portsmouth, who, as we know, are inside the playoff places. They now drop down to 5th after that result. Luton Town now go up to 4th. They are now only a point off of Carlisle United, who have 58 in 3rd. We've been talking as well about Carlisle and the loss of Charlie Wyke, and is it going to mean that they're going to fall out? Well, they have played a game more than Luton and Portsmouth, who are only 1 and 2 points behind them respectively. So the results this weekend have completely changed the complexion for a lot of the teams in the playoff places, and even Exeter City now go down to 7th after their defeat away to Hartlepool. So League 2 this weekend has been absolutely fantastic. Those 5 results have changed a lot for a lot of teams, and I would highly recommend you go and look at that table just to see how it's changed and how much tighter the top 3 especially has now gotten. League 1, start with some bit concerning news. Coventry City, they had a player called Andy Rose go down with a head injury, which stopped the game for 20 minutes in the first half. So they ended up playing 22 minutes, I think, of added time in the first half of that game. I don't know the latest on Andy Rose. I haven't seen any reports, but hopefully that's not as bad as it certainly sounded. Also on Coventry, they drew that game 0-0, but they have also today sacked their manager Russell Slade. So that's the second job he's lost this season in League 1. I don't know what they were expecting. I was reading some of the fan reaction from Coventry on Twitter. They seemed to be pretty happy with it and said it was a long time coming, but I don't know of any other manager that's going to go in there and fix the problems that are currently there at Coventry, not until the board is fixed and addressed anyway. The biggest game of the weekend by far was Scunthorpe 0, Fleetwood Town 2. Scunthorpe have been in no form whatsoever. Their chairman came out this week and said not to panic. They probably did panic a little bit because they ended up losing 2-0 to a Fleetwood Town side who are unbeaten in 18 league games. They have now accrued more points than they have ever accrued in a league season as a football club, and are slap bang in the middle of a promotion place now. They're up to 2nd. First time I think this season they've been in the automatic promotion places, so that's massive for them. They've never been as high as the Championship, and Juve Rosler has done it on an absolute shoestring. So if that one comes off, then that is an incredible story for Fleetwood Town. But that is a massive, massive result against Scunthorpe. Hopefully, for their sake, they can keep it up. But just the most incredible story for Fleetwood. Millwall were looking to go 10 games in a row with a clean sheet. Unfortunately, although they beat MK Dons, they only beat them 2-1. So their record ends at 9 straight clean sheets. And the game of the weekend was easily Rochdale versus Sheffield United, which ended 3-3. Absolute cracker. Sheffield United, as we know, top of the league and kind of running away with it now. But a fantastic result away to Rochdale, because Rochdale's home record is very, very good themselves. They'll be disappointed to concede 3 at home, but an amazing game in League 1. The Championship has been very busy all week long, and I'm going to start with the Tuesday fixtures. We only had 3 on Tuesday. I highly recommended last week that you watched Brighton & Hove Albion versus Newcastle. I hope you did, because you would have seen the jammiest goal ever scored by a team ever. Newcastle United with a massive 2-1 win away to Brighton & Hove Albion. More on Brighton in a minute. But that could be the result that changed the title complexion this season, and so did the weekend's fixtures. But more on that in a second. Also on Tuesday, you have Blackburn beating Derby County 1-0, which was massive for the bottom end of the league as well. And Aston Villa got a 2-0 win at home to Bristol City, which is obviously massive for them because of the form they've been in. The Friday fixture, Birmingham City, who we'll touch on in a minute, lost 3-1 to Leeds United. Very entertaining game, but Birmingham City, all kinds of problems once again. The Saturday fixtures. Some, again, hugely important results here. Blackburn 1, Wigan Athletic 0, takes Blackburn out of the bottom 3 now. Bristol City drop in it because of a 0-0 draw at home to Burton Albion. Both of those sides would be quite concerned they didn't get anything from that game. Derby County 2, Barnsley 1 is a great result for Derby. They've been on a poor run of form lately. Fulham 3, Preston North End 1 puts, again, more pressure on the top 6 from Fulham. I think they're only 5 points out of there now, and they do have a game in hand. Nottingham Forest. What a week it's been for Brighton & Hove Albion. Again, more on them in a minute. Sorry, Josh. But 3-0 home win for Nottingham Forest against Brighton & Hove Albion. A bizarre result that I'm not sure many people saw coming. Josh may contest that in a minute, but I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that particular scoreline. First goal for Zach Clough in that game as well for Nottingham Forest, but ridiculous result. Queen's Park Rangers 2, Cardiff City 1. Big result for Queen's Park Rangers, especially with Cardiff in the form they're in lately. Reading 2, Wolves 1 puts Wolves right bang in the middle of the relegation scrap now. They are in serious danger. Aston Villa with a 2-0 win over Rotherham United. For all the trouble they've had this season, it's the first time since 2010 that Villa have won 3 games on the bounce, so that's a good sign. I still reckon they'll be right in the playoff places and possibly even automatic promotion places next season. Sheffield Wednesday 5, Norwich City 1. We'll come to Norwich City in a minute, so I'm not going to delve too much into that, but that's a hideous result for Alex Neil, and a massive one for Sheffield Wednesday, what with Fulham breathing down their necks. And then the evening game, again, this could be the week that we saw the title race end in the Championship. Huddersfield Town 1, Newcastle United 3. Massive result for Newcastle, especially on the back of that particular Brighton result. That could be them champions now, because those are the 2 closest teams, and they made, especially Huddersfield, look very, very average. So I'm going to start with Norwich, and I want to throw this one to Chris, because we haven't had Chris's views really on Alex Neil. He's had an interesting season. They started the year, and I think most of us agreed they'd be in the mix for automatic promotion. I said they'd be champions. Then we hit the Christmas period, or at least we hit the end of October, early November. Went on a hideous run, started sliding down the league, outside the playoff places. I was still surprised he survived all the vitriol. We then get to the new year, they start to turn things around, get some fantastic results. Now they're losing again. This result, 5-1 away to Sheffield Wednesday, is a massive blow on their playoff places. Alex Neil linked with the Rangers job this week. It seems to be going a bit toxic at the top, and has been all season. But are we now getting to a point where his position is untenable for you, Chris, or do you reckon he will still manage to see out the season?
Wow, it's a really difficult one to judge, isn't it? Because I know our good friend Max actually tweeted you, didn't he, on the podcast saying, can we expect something about Alex Neil in this week's podcast? So fulfilling Max's wish. It's a really hard one to judge, because if you look at the table, and I am looking at it right now, so Norwich sitting in 8th. Now, arguably, you say they're massively underachieving, but then at the same time, is it that they're underachieving, or is it that the clubs above them are overachieving? When you look at Huddersfield, I don't think anyone would really have Leeds as high as they are at the moment. Reading and the Yap Stav, I'm not sure anyone knew whether that would work out. Sheffield Wednesday fine, Brighton, Newcastle fine, but even Fulham, I mean, as much as I was happy to sort of give them a nudge this season, I didn't think they'd actually do what they have. So I don't know. I mean, it's a weird one. Their form of late would say he won't see out the season. 2 draws, 2 defeats from the last 4 is not good. But then if they go on another run and they end up sort of sneaking in, there's always that team, isn't there, that sneaks into the playoffs. And I wonder if it could be that kind of season for them. Also, if you look at their next 4 fixtures, I would argue all 4 are winnable. Bristol City away, Blackburn at home, Barnsley at home, away to Aston Villa before they play Huddersfield. So, 4 wins out of 4, or even 3 wins and a draw out of those next 4. And we're all sat here going, well, actually, maybe they are okay. The one thing I would worry about with that Norwich side, I don't know if you agree with this, Ross, but it looks to me like quite an old side. I'm looking down the list of players here. Lafferty, 29, Jerome, 30, Naismith, 30, Houlihan, 34. I never realised he was that old. Graham Dorrans, 29, Jarvis, 30, Malumbu, 30, Whittaker, 32, Basong, 30, Martin, 31. I could go on. Turner as well, 33. It seems like an old side, and I do wonder if they're going to run out of legs. Even though they've got, a few decent young talented players as well, that would be my main concern. Tessie is another one who's post 30. So if I had to put money on it, I still think they'll make the playoffs. Is that going to be enough if they don't win the playoffs, though? Probably not. The only question I'd throw back to you, or you can throw it to Josh if you like, who else could do a better job other than Gary Rowett, who's the obvious choice, I would guess. But who else is there out there who could do a better job with this Norwich side at the moment?
Oh, that's a knotty one as well, though, isn't it? Because I reckon they probably... I said this earlier in the season, I'm sure I did. I think they'd have to nick someone off of another team, because I don't see a manager outside of Gary Rowett, who, like you say, is the obvious choice. I don't see another manager that's going to come in and fix the problems that are there with Norwich. But it's such a difficult one to judge, because... I've watched the Championship for, 10 years now, and I've watched it long enough to know that you can never count a team out, especially when they're 8th in the league, and when they've got a team that should be going up automatically. But I just don't know. Every week, I just can't predict Norwich anymore because they either trounce someone 5-1 or they get trounced 5-1. It's hugely difficult and hugely frustrating to sit here and try and analyse them because I like to think I've got a good handle on the Championship, having watched it for so long. But Norwich at the moment are just such an enigma. It's so difficult to decide whether or not I think they're going to go up or stay outside the top 6 or what's going to happen. But I'm going to throw Josh Birmingham because they're another enigma. Now, last week we watched them against Wolves and they played a bizarre 5-4-1 diamond formation and they attempted to play this Johan Cruyff-esque 17-man press which won them the day, but I was not convinced by it. I don't think Chris was either. This week it wasn't so strange this week. They still played that bizarre formation, but the pressing game wasn't as bad. They looked a bit more structured, a bit more organised, like they've had a week to learn it. And they controlled the game by and large through the midfield, but they didn't really cause too many problems to Leeds, I have to say. And they got caught cold 3 times by Chris Wood, who scored an absolutely brilliant first goal, by the way. And Alfonso Pedraza scored a very good late third goal. But they just seem to be all over the place. And realistically speaking, I know that the owners have recently said that Zola is still their man and they're going to back him. But can you make a case for him anymore after some of the performances and results?
I think it is difficult to make a case for Zola. I think we've all said it looked like more of an autograph signing rather than getting a manager in to look at the ambitions of the club, because Zola really doesn't have a great track record in management, however good a player he was. But looking at what they're doing at the moment, I think so long as the owners are content with a mid-table finish this season, give him a pre-season and an opportunity to stamp his mark on the team, then I think he should be okay to carry them to the end of the season. I don't think they're in any trouble of going down, but I think it's one of those that we just need to hold it back and not necessarily jump to conclusions anymore. It looks like he's there for the long haul. That saying the defence that they were up against is very good in the Leeds defence. Potentially, you could argue, it's one of the definitely in the top 3 of the best centre-back partnerships in the league, with Pontus Jansson and Bartley. I think Jansson is a standout defender, maybe linked with Shane Duffy. There's tying for that for the best centre-back in the league. So I think that also doesn't help them in their ability to try and break down a team, because they're not the most prolific.
Absolutely. And I think if you're right and Zola does stay on, I think Birmingham needs complete overhauls in the summer. You know, they need a complete overhaul because the players that he's got there are still Rowett's players and they play his way. They don't play the quote-unquote Zola way. I think the thing is they looked at it and they thought they could play their way out of this division with a team that doesn't have the quality of player to play along the floor. And I think Rowett's greatest strength is just keeping it simple and hitting hard on the counter, which made Birmingham so potent last season in particular. I can't hold off on this any longer, Josh. So to round us off this week, Brighton Hove Albion, like I say, 2-1 defeat to Newcastle midweek, 3-0 away defeat to Nottingham Forest this weekend. Is it fair to say the title hopes are dead, but is it also fair to say that second position no longer looks secure?
And is your bum going 50p, 5p right now? Sorry, I had to throw it in.
No, I'm quite irritated. There was only one good news from this week, and that was Knockout signing a contract extension. However, as you say, the Newcastle game, the game that Brighton were in control of for vast majorities of it, is then broken down by a fluky goal, and then Brighton seemed to lose their head after that and just capitulate. And the same thing really happens in the Forest game. The first goal's offside. Assombalonga is definitely active and certainly gets a touch on it. And Brighton just have this ability to not be able to get over any grievances they've had in the game, and will generally lose their heads in it. It's basically any time you see Lewis Dunk gets a yellow card for dissent in the game, you can probably tell that Brighton are going to lose it, because Lewis Dunk, now being the on-field captain most of the time, if Bruno's not there, they're both very hot-headed, and that's one of the problems that they do have. It's not a leadership problem, it's just that they do seem to bottle things every so often, and I wasn't too surprised about the Notts Forest result. I probably should have told you guys I thought they'd lose, because I'm sure that's a good one for the accumulator, but Brighton always generally quite rocky after having to try and force something out of this game. And not all credit to Nottingham Forest, because it was absolutely fantastic, and it was good to see Clough doing well at Notts Forest again.
Interesting bit of goalkeeping late on as well from your keeper, was it not? That was a little bit odd.
Get me started on Stockton.
he was sold a bit of a rough back pass, but his juggling skills were not the best. So, yes, indeed. And Ross, before we draw a line into the EFL, some breaking news about the Coventry manager position potentially coming out tonight.
Yes, so I've just read that Coventry City are apparently about to appoint Mark Robbins, the former Scunthorpe United manager, as their new boss, which for me is a very good appointment, actually. Not a name I thought of when I saw Russell Slade get the sack. I'm still not sure he's going to be able to change Coventry's fortunes, because they are in a complete mess, but he is a very sturdy hand, and even if they go down to League Two, if they can have something of a stable summer, then I think he's a very good manager to build with. It's also just occurred to me, what I didn't mention about Leyton Orient is that they have been issued with a winding up petition, or at least they're having a winding up petition hearing at the end of the month. I think it's March 23rd, somewhere in around that mark, so it's a couple of weeks away yet. I believe they are being contested over a tax bill of £250,000, and if the board don't believe that they can pay that money back, then they will be issued a winding up petition. So a dangerous time for Leyton Orient as well, but after the back of a 4-0 win, it's weird timing for Leyton Orient, but it's one to keep an eye on now for certain, because they are in real danger.
Yeah, I retweeted something from somebody that friend of the show, Andy Brassel, retweeted yesterday about trying to get a petition together and some signatures and put some money together to try and save the club. So it is in really serious financial difficulty. So let's hope, for the sake of football and the tradition of football, that doesn't come to pass in a negative manner. So yeah, hopefully that all works itself out. Okay, and if you happen to be a Leyton Orient fan and you want to come on the podcast and you want to tell us about what's going on, feel free, or indeed if you know of anybody, because they're the sort of stories we want to bring to the attention of everyone listening. So yes, get in touch. Okay, we'll round off the show this week with one question, because we've had no listener questions. What on earth are you all doing with your Sunday evenings? It must have been all the excitement at Man City Sunderland. But still, the question I'm going to ask, I'm going to get both of you to answer this one quickly. There's a report tonight that has fallen, going to tie it up with Arsenal. There's a report that's slipped out tonight that apparently Alexis Sanchez was dropped for a training ground strop. I'm just going to read you this sentence. This comes courtesy of Arsblog News. Both The Guardian and Telegraph claim the Chile international was later confronted by teammates after a strop during a training session in midweek. In the dressing room, apparently a blazing row erupted. It suggested that senior players supported the manager's decision to condemn Sanchez to the bench. News of this bust-up fuels rumours the 28-year-old will force a move from the Emirates this summer. He's out of contract in 2018, has been linked with moves to Paris Saint-Germain and Juventus in recent times. So both of you, I'm just going to get you to give me a sentence. Does Alexis stay or go? And do you buy this report, or do you think it's media spin? Josh, you can start us off with that one.
Oh, wow. Okay. I would say it's slightly heightened media spin on this whole thing. I think players do have arguments and do have bust-ups on the field. Obviously, you're not going to be able to report what was said in those arguments, but I think looking at it, Alexis has been out of form for the past couple of weeks. I think I've said it on a couple of other outlets that he is becoming very selfish and not necessarily playing to the team mentality that Arsenal try and strive to go for, especially under Arsene Wenger's tenure, that it is all about the team and not about the individual. He's been masking some very poor performances recently with goals and assists because there is more to a player, especially someone like him. You expect more from him in terms of build-up and not basically providing the only two chances we get in a game because every other potential chance hasn't been able to develop because he's overplayed potential. Does he stay? I don't really know, to be honest. I would say that Arsenal have been able to hold on to players in recent years, unlike from when the stadium refinancing was going on and we lost the likes of Fabregas, and I think RVP was probably the last one that we saw of a big name player that went out without the manager's consent to a point of view. But I think if someone comes in, I think the harmony in the dressing room could be a lot nicer if he wasn't there. I think he could go.
Interesting. And Ross, round us off. What do you think on this whole saga?
If that's the case, and he's been dropped because of a spat on the training ground and the players were happy with it, I am very interested to hear what they thought of him being brought on at half-time and then setting up the goal. I wonder if they regret the decision as a club, as a team. I wonder if there was apologies at half time. I wonder if there was some grovelling. It's a strange one. I rarely hear of teams, essentially telling the manager / agreeing with the manager that they should be dropping their best player. I find that odd, especially with Ozil quote unquote ill. He could be, couldn't be. I have no idea, but it's an interesting story. I think we need to delve more into it. I don't want to start putting too much stock in it just yet until tomorrow when the newspapers come out and then we get some reports to confirm or deny it. As for whether he stays or goes, I've been of the opinion for about 3 months now that his time at Arsenal is probably winding down, and I'm of the belief from listening to you as well, Chris, that PSG will probably come knocking, and if they do, his head will be turned and Arsenal will kind of have no choice.
Yes, indeed. I was presented with the horrifying idea that we could swap him for Edinson Cavani earlier on this evening by friend of the show, Dan. If that happens, you might not hear from me ever again. So, yes, it will be a busy summer ahead for the likes of Alexis Sanchez and indeed Mesut Ozil, methinks. If, of course, it's not a busy summer in the manager stakes. So it's one that we will keep our interested thoughts around until such times as that information is leaked or indeed confirmed. So, yes, good stuff. Okay, that will bring us to the end for this week then. Just a couple of very quick plugs. Our good friend Jake Bayliss is coming back onto the crew again soon. He's hopefully, time allowing, going to try and put us a weekly blog in where he looks at one game in particular from each week and gives us a little bit of his thoughts on the teams involved or the results. So look out for that on our website. That should be coming soon. I think Jake's planning to do one for next week. If you haven't already, the MLS season is underway. Have a listen to our very extensive, in-depth preview pod, 2.5 hours of American soccer chat between myself, Jimmy, Pat and Drew for a period of time as well. That is available on our website and our feed, so give that a listen. And of course the blog which Jimmy put together, which previews all the teams, and I even managed to put the kits into that, so you can have a look at all the new kits as well. But yes, the MLS season is underway. We'll be covering that on the main pod tomorrow, and that will indeed be recorded tomorrow for release on Tuesday. So that's the main pod where you can listen to all your European action. It's been a busy weekend across Europe, which is still ongoing as we speak. So tune in for that. And of course, La Liga Gav will be back with us for that as well. And then finally, as we mentioned at the start of the show, our partnership with classicfootballshirts.co.uk. Get along to their website, have a look and see if there's anything that tickles your fancy. They've got some amazing stock, new stock actually just come in this week as well. So give them a look and don't forget, tweet us if you do buy anything with a little picture, and that will go into the John Welsh Get John in a Deportivo Wanker shirt kitty, shall we say. So do let us know if you purchase anything. Right, that will do us then for this week. My thanks to both Josh and to Ross. Many thanks to you both.
Pleasure as ever.
Thank you very much.
And we will return next week. Talk is we're going to be doing a very in-depth EFL special. So keep an eye on our timeline for that. We will tweet for questions in advance when we get everything confirmed. So if you follow an EFL club or if you want to get some information on something EFL, keep an eye on our timeline and we will get your questions answered. But until then, we have been the Football Hipsters. This has been the English Breakfast Podcast. Enjoy your football in midweek. Unless you're an Arsenal fan, you might want to turn the telly off. Until next week, we'll speak to you very soon.